My name is Kate Batchelder Odell. I am a member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board. I cover a mix of topics there, but including the social safety net, poverty, and upward mobility. So it's really an honor to be part of this conversation today, both professionally and personally. I'm the mother of 2 young boys, ages 3 and 5, and often think about the country they're inheriting. So again, thank you to Ellen and the Lafayette Company for hosting us in this important conversation. I want to do a quick introduction of my panelists here, and then we're going to dive right into our conversation about young men and economic opportunity. So real briefly, I have the Senator from the great state of Texas, John Cornyn, with us today. He has been at the forefront of all sorts of economic debates in the Republican Party, and I'm excited to get his perspective. Next to him, we have Bill Beach, who is an economist and former commissioner at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, also has served tours of duty at the Heritage Foundation and elsewhere. Next to him, we have Patrick Bourke, who is a senior policy fellow at the American Institute for Boys and Men. He also wears another hat working in the Maryland's governor's office in the Office of Children. So we're looking forward to getting his practical perspective on developing young men's economic opportunities. And then finally, we have Dr. Nick Eberstadt, who is a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, who is well known as a demographer and is the only one up here who could seamlessly answer questions on the North Korean nuclear program also. So he, just a tremendous credit to his range as a scholar. So I want to open us up today. We're talking about young men. We know from the polling presentation that young men's economics prospects are really tied up in a lot of their other thinking about their life. And so we want to dive into some of the conversation about what is preventing young men from reaching their best and strongest economic potential. So I wanted to start with Bill and ask Bill to anchor our conversation in hard evidence. What do we know, Bill, about how young men are faring in the labor force, and what kind of ways does this break down different groups of men, college versus non-college educated men? What do we see in the labor market data about young men?
So this is kind of a difficult time to be looking for a job. To be honest with you, we've seen a downward trend in job creation for the last basically 18 months. And as soon as the Bureau of Labor Statistics opens again, which we hope is any day, we may see the September numbers and the October numbers confirming this general direction. Part of that is due to the fact that immigration has really slowed. And so the job creation that would have been associated with new migrants coming into the country is no longer happening at the pace that it was. But even accounting for that, you've seen a real reduction. And then if you focus in on the age group 16 to 24, why that particular interval is because that's the interval that we collect data for, which we call the young worker. We don't collect data on labor prior to the 16th birthday. Among men, the participation rate in the economy has fallen dramatically since 1995, when I'm going to begin my numbers. So when I say participation, that means they either have a job or they are looking for a job. If you're not looking for a job and you don't have a job, you are not participating in the economy. That's what's called the labor force participation rate. We've been collecting that rate since 1947. And since 1995, among the young workers, that labor force participation rate has fallen from 70.6% of all the people who are in that age interval to 55.1%. That is a large decrease of 22%. Now, the 55.1% labor force participation rate means that nearly half of the population of young men between the ages of 16 and 24 are not looking for work or are not working. Some of them are in school, some of them are in the military, though we exclude the military from what's called the base of that population. But let me just say that that's also the case for young girls. So in 1995, young girls in the same group had a 63% labor force participation rate, and now they have 53.4. It's not the 22% drop that we saw in young men, but it's a pretty good drop at 15.5%. So there's something going on in that age group, worse for men than for girls, but I just do lay that out there. I think it's really, really important. And if you're a young man or a young woman, but let's just focus on young men because that's today's conference, and you are in the western part of the United States, you're facing an even harder time finding a job. The unemployment rate in the western region, census region, is now 4.9% compared to the south where it's 3.8%. And if you're in the Pacific part of the western region, the Pacific Division, which is California, Washington, and Oregon, you have a 5.2% unemployment rate as of the last time we collected and reported those unemployment rates. If I could just do one more thing about college graduates, it's sort of interesting. If you look at unemployment for overall young workers and college graduates, these data I put together in charts. I don't have a QR code, I'm so sorry. But if you want the charts, the first come, first serve, and I'll give you the charts. So I put data together from January of 1990 to June of 2025. So it's the most current data. And this is the unemployment for overall young workers. That's that youth group that I've spoken about, 16 to 24. Recent college graduates, all workers and college graduates. Okay, so if you're just a worker, the unemployment rate nationally, the standard unemployment rate that we all love and watch, was 4% in June. It's a little higher now, but for this particular purpose, I just have these June data, 4%. If you are a college graduate, you've graduated from college. Remember, and we'll talk about this, I suspect, the most important thing is to make sure you graduate from whatever program you're in. If you're incomplete high school, if you're incomplete GED, if you're incomplete 2 years, if you're incomplete 4 years, you might as well not have gone, right? It's completing that degree. So if you complete a college degree, your unemployment rate's 2.7%, 4% versus 2.7%. Now, if you are a recent graduate facing this job market, your unemployment rate's 4.8%. You see the challenge that you have. And if you're a recent graduate in the West, it's probably well above 6%. But if you're a young worker, these are the workers age 16 to 24, whether you're in college or not, your unemployment rate is 7.4%. And I have seen that unemployment rate at 11%. So the context here is that graduation makes a big difference. Right now, it's a difficult time to find a job. There's lower participation in the economy than we have seen, I think, ever, for both men and women in the young groups. And it's harder to find a job, harder to participate if you're in the West than if you're in the South. It's hard in the Northeast. And in a little bit, if you want me to, I'll talk about new and emerging jobs. Mm-hmm. So
thanks, Bill. Thanks for anchoring our conversation in that data. Nick, I want to turn to you because I think that's a compelling summary about men having lower participation rates in the labor force. But to what extent is that social, or to what extent is it economic barriers? Why are young men participating in the labor force at lower levels?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me here. And I think Dr. Beach has laid the table very well on this, so I'll try to not repeat any of the information that he's already shared. The received consensus, I think, among labor economists in the United States is that the problem of work for men has to do with economic, structural, technological change in the U.S. economy. And there is obviously truth in that, but that is not the whole story, and I don't think it's really even most of the story, and I'll try to tell you why. Our employment statistics system was devised to fight the last war. It was devised during the Great Depression, and obviously the overwhelming crisis at the time was unemployment. So our unemployment framework looks at people in the labor force who are employed, people in the labor force who are not employed but are looking for work. What it leaves out is the not in labor force group. Because back in 1939, 1940, when this system was being devised, nobody would have ever thought it would be possible for a large number of men of working age to not have jobs and not be looking for them. But today, if we look at the numbers, we'll see, I'll talk about the 25 to 54s. I know that those aren't the young men, but to me, almost anybody nowadays looks young. So let me just talk about the prime age men. For every guy in that group who doesn't have a job and is looking for one, there are over 3 who are neither working nor looking for work. And the received wisdom on this is that there is less demand for less skilled work. That's true as far as it goes. But none of these macro factors and macro theories can explain why the proportion of workless young men, neither working nor looking for work, has risen in almost a monotonic straight line for 60 years. Irrespective of business cycles, irrespective of China entering the WTO. There's something sociological going on there. I'll mention a couple of things. One thing is the, what we might call the supply side barriers, not the demand side, but the supply. Willingness to enter the job market. Among guys who are high school dropouts, there's a gap of like 30%, maybe more than 30% today, percentage points, between native-born American guys who are unmarried and foreign-born guys who are married. I don't really think that the educational system in El Salvador, the K through 10 years, is that much better than the United States, is to be able to explain a huge gap like that. We've got a disability archipelago of different, crazy patchwork quilt of different programs that have turned from their initial mission of protecting people who need to be protected because they cannot work. And in too many cases now, they are providing the means for a work-free life. And a huge amount of human potential is being lost there. I'd be able to tell you more about this if we collected the numbers properly, but there's not an office you can go to in Washington that will tell you how many people in the United States in total are receiving disability benefits from our half dozen or dozen programs. They don't talk to each other. One last thing to mention for our group here, crime and punishment. We have a huge blind spot because Uncle Sam, for some reason, does not think it's interesting to enumerate the number of people in our country who have felonies in their CV. Some of my, defiant nerd, demographer brothers have tried to reconstruct these numbers, and they suggest that something like 1 out of 7 adult men today has had a felony in their background. I can't tell you as much as we should be able to about how that creates barriers for re-entry to the labor force, but clearly this is also a huge problem that we have to recognize.
Thanks, Nick. Senator Cornyn, I want to turn to you because I know Dr. Eberstadt's work has been influential in your conference and how your conference thinks about men and work. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how the Senate is thinking about what barriers are facing young men in particular, and do you expect any of the items in the budget bill to have an effect on this? How are Republicans talking about this issue in general? And anything you might think is still left to do that would meaningfully change some of the social economic dynamics that Nick is so well describing.
Well, one of the challenges we have, obviously COVID-19 didn't help in terms of workforce participation, but this is much bigger than just COVID-19. One of the problems that we've had is all of the incentives that the government provides not to work. And my predecessor, Phil Graham, wrote a great book I recommend to all of you, The Myth of American Inequality, which charts out all of the various transfer payments, they're called, for people who don't work. And obviously those incentives are powerful, and so eliminating some of those disincentives from work, like requiring in the One Big Beautiful Bill work requirements for things like Medicaid and SNAP benefits, is a start. This used to be a bipartisan consensus back when Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton passed the Welfare Reform Act. The idea of able-bodied individuals actually working and contributing to their own support and that of their family and their community, and the sort of the self-respect and the dignity that come along with that, that used to be a broad bipartisan consensus, not so much, it seems like, these days. But we've tried to do other things in the One Big Beautiful Bill in addition to eliminating some of the disincentives to work. And by the way, if you're going to school or providing services in your community, you can also qualify under those provisions. It's not just work, because sometimes work is not readily available. But we also need to recognize the fact that there's a whole bunch of people who we need in the workforce who aren't going to go to a four-year liberal arts college, and hence the expansion of the Pell Grant to include the trades. I was recently in Nacogdoches, Texas, where I think the president of Kilgore College told me that somebody could complete a 12-week program, I believe it was as an electrician, and earn up to $60,000 a year. I was in McAllen, Texas, where you can train to be a diesel mechanic, and after 1 year, you're making $25 an hour, and that's just the beginning. And if you move over to West Texas, where Abilene, Texas, where one of the largest data centers in the world are being constructed, there are 6,000 construction workers on site. And thankfully, Texas is embracing this idea of training people in the various trades. I was looking at something this morning that pointed out if you had a hole in your wall in your living room, I think it was Mark Andreessen who made this observation, the cheaper thing to do is to buy a large flat screen TV to cover it up rather than to try to employ somebody to fix it just because it's so expensive. So these are good, well-paying jobs, but they're not a four-year liberal arts college, which may qualify you to do absolutely nothing other than to continue your education. And the final thing I will mention, beyond the expansion of opportunity zones, and we can talk about all this, but Nick mentioned the fact that a large percentage of our population have criminal records. And one of the hardest things to do in America is to get a job if you have a conviction, because you can't find a place to live, probably, and you can't find a place to work. And so what do you think you're going to end up doing but continue doing what got you in trouble in the first place? So a lot of the reentry programs that Congress has tried to help facilitate are, I believe, important to getting people back into productive work. And there is such an idea of, if not rehabilitation, in some instances, transformation of individuals who finally realize that the path that they're on is a very self-destructive path and they want to change, and we ought to be able to provide some opportunities for them to do that. So a lot more we could talk about in that vein, but those are just some of the ideas.
Thank you, Senator. Patrick, I want to go to you next because you have practical experience running some of these programs, helping folks use their skills to find opportunity. And so I want to get from you a sense of what have you learned from administering those programs about what barriers folks are facing and what actually needs to happen to get them into a good opportunity. And I also wanted to see if you would address, the Senator brings up an increased focus on vocational training. This has been part of our dialogue for a while now. If you poll people, they will all say, I support vocational training, yet we still have a kind of a larger cultural favoritism towards four-year college that has been hard to overcome. So I'm curious your lessons from your own experience and also what more can be done to make vocational training a more attractive option.
Sure. A lot in that question, but
of course, sorry, Patrick.
No, all good. I think that to the folks sitting on the sidelines, I think it's tough when minimum wage has been unable to keep up with the benefits that folks get from staying home. So I think that that's one component to it. I think when we think about also some of the data, what it shows in these economists, I am not an economist, talked about some of the challenges we face today. Going back to the 1970s, we haven't seen men's median earnings increase. And in fact, we've seen declines in those earnings over time. Over that same period of time, we've seen women's wages grow, and we've seen those in the upper quintiles for men grow as well. Now, we can, for men in particular, we can be excited and celebrate the growth for women, but we can have two thoughts in our head at the same time and acknowledge that there are still a lot of men who are not succeeding in this place. I think that, Nick mentioned the free trade and a whole host of other issues that may contribute to this. I'd also include that the 1970s is also the period when we saw the greatest union engagement in this country. We've seen a precipitous decline of union membership starting in the 1970s and declining significantly to now where we have the lowest levels of union engagement. Why is that important? One, because unions advocate for healthy work environments, healthy work conditions, as well as better pay. But they also, one of the things, the themes of this conference has been around mental health and community and getting people out of their echo chambers. Unions, the best version of them, provide mentorship and training and community in a meaningful way. So to speak to more of your questions though, where I'm coming from is I graduated in the wake of the Great Recession. There's other folks who graduated in the wake of the COVID pandemic. There's folks right now who are graduating as entry-level jobs change due to AI. And we've been told this narrative that if you go to college, you go to education, you get some training, you're gonna end up better off. And I think the reality is that workforce and training has been decoupled from the importance of employment at the end of education. And I think that that is a real challenge. There was a great study done just by Burning Glass and AEI, looked at the 1.1 million credentials that are out there in the workplace. They found that only 10% of those conferred wages of about $5,000 more as a result of participating in that training. The top 12% provided some statistical benefit to individuals who are going through those training programs, but that meant that 88% of those credentials are not conferring some benefit by participating. And that's a real challenge. If I've been told my entire life, go to college, you'll end up better off. That's not been the case, unfortunately. And I think we need to do a better job of making sure that the work that we're promising folks is better aligned. So if you're going through a short-term credentialing program, like you're talking about, what is the stigma? There's been far too many people who've been burned by the education system who, hey, I'm gonna go get this welding credential or IT certificate or a medical assisting program, and you're not ending up with a better job and potentially some debt that comes with it. And the next time somebody's like, you should go back to college, you're gonna be like, no way. That burned me the last time, I'm not going back. So I think those are some of the challenges and why we're seeing some of that stigma.
Yeah, thank you. Bill, I wanted to get you in on this same question about what kind of skills to develop are the most fundamental in our current economy. What are you seeing about what young men should focus their education on? What should they be thinking about? What is most valuable to them in the labor market at this point?
Yeah, great, excellent. the most popular book or publication, publication at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, anybody guess it? Employment Situation Report, the CPI report? It's the Occupational Outlook Handbook. I want to tell you, that thing is hit millions of times a year, so we could fund the government if we were charged with this, but we're not doing it. That's a good idea, by the way.
Yeah, we'll try that.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's in that book as a way of answering the question. The current forecast for the next 10 years is that the U.S. economy will produce about 5.1 million jobs. It's not too much. The last 10 years is 13 million jobs. So that big drop-off has to do with the disruptions that are occurring, AI disruptions, technical disruptions. A lot of jobs are just going to disappear. For example, if you're a postal service clerk, change jobs right now. I mean, it's just a huge drop will occur. If you're if you're a bank teller, a data entry clerk, a cashier, an administrative assistant, a printer, these are all going away. These jobs are just probably in 10 years, they're just not going to be there. On the other hand, if you are a big data person, a fintech engineer, a machine learning person, you've got huge prospects. You don't have to be at that level because fast-growing jobs exist in the vocational trades. Let me just give you a few. There will be a big increase in elevator and escalator installers and repairers. Most of them will work for the Metro here in Washington, D.C. That requires a high school diploma or an equivalent, and it pays $100,000 a year. Isn't that great? Construction manager, a bachelor's degree, $101,000. Dental hygienist, $87,000. Wind turbine technician, but the winner, electricians. There's so much going on in the data world. If you don't know what you're going to do, don't ask your mom or dad. Just go out and get an electrical degree, because you'll start off with about $62,000. And let me just talk a little bit about the degrees. There's a wonderful forecast of the degree compensations, which degrees compensate better and which degrees don't compensate better. These are also a 2-year and four-year schools. Information systems and computer science, anything in engineering, mathematics, physics, economics. This is so good. Business analytics. These are all very positive, high-paying jobs, over $100,000 median salary once you're into your career. They're all very good. You should go there. But let me tell you, stay away from general education, the arts, English, poetry, anything dealing with education.
I feel like you're coming for me. This feels more and more like you're trying to do.
Yeah. So here's kind of the bottom line. This next 10 years will be the golden age of vocational training, of the golden age of technical training. If you're a young person, a young man, interested in what should I do, just go out and get an electrical degree, or woodworking, or something that deals with your hands, because the pay expectations are very high. Remember, we're dealing with skills, and then what are the traits? We're looking for formation, men who are formed to be patient, diligent, on the job, understanding group work. That's really important. How do you get that? Well, there's many ways we could get that. I'll just end with one little quick story. In this town, in Washington, D.C., there is a club called the Fishing Club. And it's a very interesting club. Primarily inner-city older men, 70 years age, 80 years of age, who have raised their families, and they're in the midst of all these young men, 12, 13 years old, who have no fathers, never had a father in the family, never had a father. Fatherless families are, more than half. And so what they do is they take these young men fishing, and they teach them how to fish. They go down to the Potomac. Hopefully they don't eat any of the fish, but they go down to the Potomac and they teach them to fish. These young men who go through the fishing club program, which is just a voluntary thing, have very little incidence of interaction with the criminal justice system. They tend to get work, they tend to be formed with certain skills. If you learn how to fish, you learn how to be patient. And that is so important for the kind of work that we all have to do during our working lives. So there are little things that people can do. The sewing club is for girls, and it's the same model. So there you go.
Thanks, Bill. I think that really connects economic capital with social capital in this conversation here. Nick, I was wondering if you could give us a broader demographic perspective on what this portends if it doesn't change direction and if men don't get back into the labor force. And with that slightly foreboding question, I might want to pair, is there anything that gives you optimism that this problem is starting to take on a national salience and starting to be of more pressing concern?
What gives me optimism is that at the heart of this problem is a question that we can all solve, and that's the question of human agency. Why is it that high school dropout men who are born in other countries have the same sort of high level of labor force participation as US-born college grads? Why is it that despite the racial or ethnic differences that we see in workforce participation, why is it that married black guys have higher workforce participation than unmarried white guys? The reason, it isn't because there's some magic in this thing. It's because of motivation and attitude and outlook and an approach to challenges, to grit. As long as we look at ourselves as helpless victims of some social probability curve, we're going to be in trouble. But as long as we understand that we have within ourselves the ability to tackle problems and with grit and determination to come at them again and again, you get very different outcomes. You get very different results. One very small thing in relation to this, I don't think this is not something that government can solve. There's some things that government can't solve. During my lifetime, we've seen the death of the summer job. Okay? And when I was a teenager, shortly after the end of the ice warming period, it was a thing. It was the norm for teenage guys and also teenage girls. You went out, you got a job because you wanted to have some pocket money. You didn't want to have your parents in your face. You wanted to maybe save for college or maybe do something else with the money. The proportion of 15 to 17-year-old guys and girls who are in the workforce in July is about a third as high as it was 50 years ago. And that means that for those young men and women, their first collision with the labor force is going to be when they're 20-something. I mean, they're not going to have the attitude adjustment that people like I had when we were a teenager. And so all of this deals with the whole kind of mentality question, which is necessary to succeed. And you have to get your own success. What happens if we don't do this? This is not a happy story. Continuing very high levels of male dropout from the workforce. The prime age male employment rate today is about as high as it was when it was first measured in 1940. That was the Great Depression. We've got the Great Depression scale problem with work for guys today. If that continues, we've got slower growth, we've got bigger wealth and income gaps in our country, we probably have more welfare dependence and bigger pressure on the budget, we've got less social mobility, we've got more fragile families. What have I forgotten to mention?
I think that covers it. I also wanted to ask Senator Cornyn briefly you mentioned the bipartisan consensus of work as something inherently meaningful beyond the economic opportunity it provides. I want to ask a variant of the same question as I did to Dr. Eberstadt. Is there anything that makes you optimistic about having a better policy consensus in Congress on work as a cornerstone of life? And do you have can you explain how that fell out of fashion as a mainstream part of our bipartisan politics?
Well, if we could figure that out, we would reopen the government. And then we could solve our other challenges. I know we haven't talked about family formation, which of course Nick's an expert in, and others too, and sort of the role model that young men used to have in their own father who was living in the same household, which is absent in too many young boys' lives. But also things like mentoring programs. I know my friend Tim Scott, who's been one of the principal proponents of opportunity zones, has talked about the importance of a guy who basically was I think he had a State Farm insurance agency, but sort of took him under his wing and provided the first real male role model he had in his life. But I do think, if I can diverge a little bit from the question, I do think this is not just an academic issue or an economic issue. It's a national security issue too, because when we're talking about more and more young men getting in the trades, we're talking about building things. And we don't build things in America like we used to. Now we're trying to figure out ways to bring manufacturing and some of those things back on board. But we've got a whole host of obstacles, including permitting issues, our litigation system, which endlessly delay infrastructure construction and completion. But our principal competitor in the world, China, is known for building things. And part of the answer may be, as Dan Wang, who wrote this great little book called Breakthrough, he said, China is led by engineers, America by lawyers. I'll stop right there. As a recovering lawyer, I'll let you read into that what you wish. But again, a lot of these things aren't things that government really has much control over, particularly issues like family formation and young men not having role models in their lives. We're trying to figure ways to patch that by other means, by, as I said earlier, eliminating some of the disincentives for non-work and the like. But we need to have a robust labor participation. We need to start building things in America. We need to start doing things like one of the things we did in the tax cuts in the One Big Beautiful Bill was President Trump said he wanted to have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And most of us started out at an entry-level job that may have paid minimum wage, but we didn't plan on staying there any longer than we had to. But it did provide at least a foundation of the kind of self-discipline and motivation that you need then to move on and do other things. But certainly maybe providing a little greater reward with no tax on tips, no tax on overtime will help around the margins.
Well, I want to be sure to fit in some questions, so we have a microphone to pass around, and we will take a couple questions. We'll go right here.
Hi. Thank you guys for having this panel. I think it's a really important topic. My name is Amadeus. I'm Dan Kane's friend that he mentioned earlier, who is a published author and podcast host on the topics of men's health and masculinity. Excuse me. So you guys have been discussing economics. One of the previous panels discussed more mental and emotional health. So my question is, how do we balance what is best for the individual, which, as Dr. Beach, you point out, is vocational professions, with what is best for society, which Richard Reeves of the American Institute of Boys and Men has indicated is more men entering the HEAL professions of health, education, administration, and literacy, which would help to address the lack of male mentorship and role models that one of the earlier panels discussed as one of the biggest problems facing young boys and men. Thank you.
Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Patrick, please.
I can get a shot as
Yeah.
somebody working for Richard. I think that your question portends that the jobs that are in HEAL professions are not the same quality as those in the skilled trades. And I think that that's not necessarily the case. I think that you can have a really great opportunity as a professional educator, as a teacher. And that's something that we're doing in Maryland. Governor Moore is very dedicated to increasing the number of male teachers. We used to have 30% of teachers in the 1980s were men. We're now at 23%. And if we talk about mentorship, we talk about having those male role models, some of the most influential people in my life were when I was 16, 17 years old, and they were those male teachers that I had. So if we're lacking those, it's both of those things. One, you can have a good career, but then two, you can shape that next person who's coming after you. And the same thing goes for the healthcare profession. Those can be really good jobs, provided that we provide good pathways for those individuals. You know, starting somebody in a medical assisting role is probably not the place that you want them to end up. Like, that's not going to be a good career trajectory. But if we can build better pathways, use the registered apprenticeships, use earn and learn models that we've seen to be very effective, where somebody doesn't have to take an opportunity cost to improve their lives, we're going to see much better outcomes. So getting somebody from that medical assistant all the way to an RN, which right now seems impossible, but I think if we build better pathways, we can do that and solve both problems.
That's great. Thank
If
you.
we're, just one
Please,
quick
Bill.
word, if we're thinking about mentoring people to have good jobs, the top 5 skills that we need to mentor on, these are the ones that employers are looking at worldwide. They are analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, and agility. That's number 2. Leadership and social influence, creative thinking, motivation, and self-awareness. And if you think about those skill buildings, that's all about mentoring people, forming them when they're younger to be as good as they possibly can be. And this is what employers are looking for. So form around those skills and you'll have better outcomes.
We will go right over there. Microphone's coming.
Yeah, I'm Michael New. I'm a professor at the Catholic University of America. This question is for the entire panel. What impact has the gig economy had on labor force participation among men? And I've just heard kind of anecdotally, and some research indicates that consistent work tends to create kind of better social outcomes than kind of sporadic or infrequent work.
Yeah. I can give you just a quick, I'm the numbers guy today, so I brought it all with me right here. So if in a survey of disruption from largely technological sources, the number of jobs that will be disrupted in the United States is estimated at right at 35% in the next 5 years. So there'll be 35% disruption. That's not all gig, it's not all platform based, but the disruptor here is coming at us from the technological side. It's a good thing that we're not average, because the average disruption is 39%, and if you're in Egypt, Zimbabwe, Colombia, Portugal, or Israel, it's over 40% of all jobs will be disrupted. So if you're preparing yourself for the future, if you're learning something right now, the best thing you can learn is a trade, because those are jobs that will not be disrupted by the platform that you're working with. Mm-hmm. Learn something where you can work with your hands and in your mind with those skill sets that I just mentioned a moment ago.
We have time for one more question. Great.
Good morning. Travis Cummings. I work for an American manufacturer, and to hit up what the senator said, we are about to green light about $4 billion in projects. One in your state of Texas, Granbury. We're waiting. I think we will have the green light this week. So what I'm interested in is we have a plethora of jobs. So I live in Louisiana. My company's in Missouri. So we're doubling our capacity right now. Plus, we have new LNG factory coming on board in Louisiana, along with Meta's 1 gig facility there. So we have the jobs. I think from a state level, we're doing a better job of finding people. So how can the federal government work with our state agencies like Missouri Enterprise or Lobby in Louisiana to put these people out? I'm visiting Thursday, Utah, a ribbon cutting with Caterpillar for a 1.6 gig data center in the middle of the desert. So the jobs are there. It's just how do we get them there? How do we get, we have jobs. So that's my question, is how the federal government can help the states, agencies like that.
We're not to be political today, so I'll stay away from that. One of the things which has not worked in the past 50 years are job training programs at the federal level. They have not worked. So please, just look at the Mathematica study, look at any of the big studies, and maybe it's made a little difference in lifetime earnings. But what does work is making sure that employers have as little regulatory burden as possible in hiring somebody and in giving training. And there's some very good bills in the House and in the Senate right now that would provide income to employers to get vets trained, to get the wives of vets trained, to get people who are relocating, coming out of unemployment trained. I think that really works well. So the locus of effectiveness in getting people on the job, in the job, is at the private sector level. That's where we ought to put our emphasis. And then if someone is having trouble locating to a job, that's the major impediment for people not getting work, is that they're in New York but the job's in Texas. There may be a role for the federal government through the tax system or through some kind of other subsidy to provide transportation and relocation services. Or maybe it's a subsidy to the employer so that there's a tax cut available. I think there's 6 million unfilled jobs in the United States right now, and we have roughly 4.7 million people who are unemployed. That just is not a good balance, is it?
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.